right, thank you for staying with the Monday Report. Let's continue that conversation on safety in schools. My guests are still with me, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, Executive Director of SAWA Agenda, Dr. Njoki Fernandez, School Health and Safety Consultant, and Amos Kaburu, Chief Consul, Opticum Group. And I'll come back to you, Dr. Manyasa. At this particular point, T. Mekesa here says everyone in Kenya needs to be trained on life skills and fire drills at least once. Should we incorporate safety training in the curriculum, and how far does it go? Because Dr. Njoki said it's a wide array of issues. There's the health, there's water, so how do you know where to stop?
Before we even talk about training everyone, can everyone who is responsible for something truly be responsible for it? Because these are young children. We are talking about young children who are victims of this fire. Someone surely was responsible for their safety. Yeah. So can that someone be responsible for their safety before we even talk about training everyone? So one of the things that has never happened in this country, and the reason we keep seeing these fires recur, because we are also having issues with fires in secondary schools now, it's because we have never made anybody answer for the criminal negligence and sometimes deliberate acts of arson that we see costing schools property, costing the public, who is the taxpayer property therefore, and costing lives and that come from either negligence or sometimes deliberate acts of criminality. I feel that it is time, first of all, to make people responsible before we even think of training. Because training is just one aspect. It can only help those who can benefit from that training. When you're talking about young children, someone was responsible for them. We need that side of the story told. And we need to see responsibility assigned. Someone was sending me a message and saying they feel that the school board and the ministry officials responsible in that area should be in remand right now as the investigation continues. Maybe that will be harsh, but can we, at the end of this exercise, be able to see what exactly happened? Because most of the time we never get to know what exactly happened. And if we don't know what happened, how can we prevent recurrence? We must know what happened. We must know that someone was supposed to ensure that the door to the dormitory opens outwards, but it was opening inward. And if someone was doing that contrary to clear guidelines, they need to carry some responsibility. We need to know that if the guidelines say a dormitory must have 2 doors, that there was not 1 door only on the dormitory. The guidelines say there should be no grills in the windows to allow. So we keep reinforcing these walls and trying to protect children from perceived danger from outside and totally ignoring the fact that danger can come from inside. If there is either a false alarm that causes a stampede, or there is an actual outbreak of something like a fire, as we have seen, or even structures coming down, as we have seen happen in the past, can we get people taking responsibility for their omissions and commissions? And then if we make sure that that always happens, it becomes a significant deterrent.
Okay. Njoki, would training help? Or is this just pure negligence? And I keep asking this because, you know, in that guideline that I keep referring to in 2008, it says there needs to be a subcommittee that deals with safety in schools, which has the headmaster there and everybody else, board members, parents. It further goes to say, before the learners even go to sleep, there needs to be someone who walks through their sleeping area to inspect before they sleep. We all know that doesn't happen. So do we need training for, and should this training be school specific? Because even if we train them in terms of dealing with fire using water, there are some schools that don't have water. So that will still be an uphill task.
I think the training is at the very end of the chain. Before we even think about training, we need a change of attitude. We need to just have some retrospection, some contemplation, and to think that we have really been given a big responsibility to look after these children, you know, the future generation, the next, you know, and these children are innocent and they're looking up to us to look after them. So we have to be intentional as a school, as a community, because training is one of the very many things that we are supposed to do. So I have listed 5. Maybe I can go through them very quickly. Number 1, let's allow schools to use their resources. Each school, like he was saying, in their environment, in their ecosystem, knows how they can deal with whatever struggles they're having. If they need better dormitories, let them figure out as a school, how are we going to make sure that our children are not squeezed and they're not cramped. If the dining room is not big enough, let us see what we can do. If the washrooms are not enough, the sanitary facilities, as a community, yeah? So parents, alumni, the community, the church, let us come together and look after our children in that school within the guidelines that have been provided. And then I think there's something that Manyasi said that is very important. We need to empower the Parents Association, from the National Parents Association to the county, to the province, so that these parents then can take their responsibility into their own hands, and they can then assist the government to manage the school the way it's supposed to be. So the National Parents Association needs to be empowered, needs to be funded, and they need to be allowed to do whatever it is they're supposed to do. To the Ministry of Education, they need to play a supervisory role. Right now, the standard is so low that anything goes. You know, we need to up that game. And I'm sure if there were punitive measures taken for those students, those schools that don't comply, then we can then begin to see a change, because that is the role of the ministry, supervising, implementing of all these very many policies that we have. And then there is a role for sponsors. Many of these schools have sponsored. Some of them are faith-based. Some of them are whatever nature of sponsors that they have. And then the associations, KESHA, KEPSHA, KPSA. I think we need to hold each other to a higher standard. If you're in an association of school heads or school teachers, let us come up with our policy and hold each other to a very high standard. And the sponsors do a lot for the school. Can we then make sure that we insist on this area of health and safety? We need to have an honest conversation. And each principal, each school director, each school owner today, I want you to just think about that school that you're running. Because this fire can happen to any one of our schools. Yeah. Those children could be my son, could be my daughter. So let's have an introspection and an honest conversation, and think, what do I need to do to ensure that the children that have been given to me are safe? Then our training is one of the things that we will do
at the tail end,
as one of as the change. As a change that we want to see as part of the bigger picture.
And Amos, you talked about these disjointed policies. Is this because even the regulation is different? Because you see, regulators of learners comes TSC and the teachers there. Then there's the regulators of the facilities, which is now the Ministry of Education. Is that where the problem is? So that nobody's reading from the same page?
There is a big problem, and I've argued this many times, but few people seem to appreciate that we cannot run a national system of education. It is completely impossible to run a national system of education. All you need is to provide some broad parameters within which people need to operate. Because even the reality of our operationalization of education in this country is highly local. It goes back to decisions made at the local level. And so we even trying to make safety look like a very complicated matter. If you sat down here with Dr. Sheila Wamahiu, and she tells you of some of the studies she's done with children around protection and safeguarding, you'll be shocked. That it's a very interesting conversation that even you can have with children, or even just drawing the map of the school on what are the unsafe spaces and the risks associated with every institution. It is not something that needs to come from Nairobi. So that at that point of looking at what are the risks involved, it is really something that needs to be done at the local level. In fact, this manual even complicates what is calling a safety committee. You don't need all those things. Any progressive head of institution knows that the primary responsibility is about safety of children. Because the greatest risk, and all of us seated over here, we run institutions. We know that the greatest risk you can ever run is a reputational risk. And you know very well that when something like this happens, your reputation is at stake. So no one really wants to get to that level where your reputation is at risk. And so I think I also implore on our school managers and head teachers, please, it is something that all of us can do, as Njoki mentions over here. We can really go back to our schools and look at, if we were to conduct a bare minimum of a safety audit. You do not need an expert to come and tell you these wires which are hanging over here, this kind of ground that you are having over here is a problem. These things are not distant from us. We know them.
Yeah.
You can see wires which are hanging. You can see grounds which are likely to injure children.
Yeah.
So if we can allow school systems to thrive at the local level, it is the beginning point, because that is the point at which we are able to, first of all, identify what are the risks involved. We are able to look at what are some of the possible mitigation strategies, even now before we think about resources.
Yeah.
So some of these things are not complicated, as I did mention. I visited St. Mary's, and children in grade 4 were demonstrating how to fight fire.
Okay.
It is something that is doable, and we have got a lot of institutions willing to help. St. John Ambulance is doing a fantastic job. It's not just about fires.
Okay.
They are always willing to partner with a lot of schools. A lot of our schools already have got the Scout movement. So we are talking about things which we can already build on to something that you already have.
Okay.
And this question of safety is not just about fires alone. It's broader than fire.
Okay.
All these things are possible. Because if you look at the fantastic work that Dr. Njoki does with Harry, for instance, she's supporting a lot of schools, because many schools are far away from health facilities. But you can imagine what she does. She brings some of these services right next to the school.
Yeah.
So you do not need to have a hospital in every school. You can partner with the private sector. You can partner with many people.
Okay.
Resources are abundant. So we really can't be sitting here spending a lot of time, instead of growing our economy, we are complaining about fires and some things that just require common sense.
Okay. Manyasa, you want to jump in?
I agree that school systems thriving at the local level will be part of the solution. It's not a complete solution. It's not a complete solution, because one would ask, who has stopped the other schools from being the St. Mary's? There is no active government policy stopping them. Yeah. And Arusha was a private school. It's not really constrained by government systems. What has happened to it? I think that we have to accept that not everyone here is as egalitarian as we wish them to be. There are people cutting corners deliberately, knowing. There are school heads buying maize and storing in poor storage facilities for over years. And this maize is becoming poison to school children. So we need to enforce the guidelines that are there, first of all. Determine to what extent they work or fail to work before we can think about what is the alternative. For now, we can't even think of alternatives really, because what we have, we don't know whether it works or not. It has not been complied with. We must enforce compliance.
Yeah.
When everyone has complied, then we see the gaps in delivering the safety of the children that we desire. So for me, primary thing right now, enforce the rules.
Yeah.
And where there is non-compliance, punish those who need to be punished, so that everyone complies.
Yeah.
When everyone has complied, there is nothing in those rules barring any innovative person from innovating to make them better. What there is people not innovating, first of all, but also people not complying even with the guidelines are the basic standard.
The bare minimum.
No one is stopped from exceeding them. Yeah. So for me,
just out of curiosity, Daktari, when you're doing your research, what were some of the reasons why they gave for not complying? If you say 46% of the schools are the only ones that have a fire assembly, this is not a resource issue. It's just an allocation of a place so that in case of a fire, students know where to go. Yeah. Why don't they have that?
Most of them are telling us that, one, we don't have even the personnel to be able to organize this kind of stuff. They feel that they are overstretched. So every teacher has so many lessons, too much to deal with. They don't have time for anything beyond the curriculum delivery that they are required to deliver. And then we also evaluate them purely on curriculum delivery. That's why every parent who is taking their child to the most congested school is looking at the previous year's mean score.
And nothing else.
And nothing else. No one is looking at how safe is the child in this school, what is the discipline history of this school, what are the facilities in this school, what is the kind of leadership that this school has. They're looking at what was the last mean score. Even if the school was accused of stealing exam, for as long as they had a good mean score, parents are rushing to take their children there. So now we have schools that are overflowing at the seams, when you also have schools that don't have learners. Because the criteria is the mean score. Yeah. By the ministry, by TSC, by the parent. And I think that needs to change. So that we are focusing on, first of all, primarily safety should be primary. It should come before anything else. Yeah. And when we have seen that children are safe, because it's only when children are safe and in an environment that is socially and emotionally safe, that they also grow and develop into responsible adults. Rather than we are trying to focus on drilling these children to get the grades, regardless of where and how these grades are being obtained. Okay. We have students in schools staying up to 11 in the night and waking up at 4 every day, Monday to Monday. That is a health issue. That's a safety issue for learners. We have learners in day schools. Last Thursday, I was on my way going to Kisumu very early in the morning at around 5 hours in Mahiu. I find a small boy, 13-year-old, we were 2 of us in the car. He's on the way going to school. And there were many of them on the road there asking for lifts, even girls, at 5 in the morning. Yeah. They're trying to get to school. It is a safety issue.
It's a safety issue.
Yeah. So we need to change our minds, as Dr. Njoki said, and start to determine what really matters to us, what matters to these children, what is going to be important in developing them holistically into responsible adults.
All right. Let me see some feedback, then I'll come to all of you for closing remarks here. We're really pressed for time. Let's bring up the feedback and see what you're saying at Trevor Mbiji at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Monday Report. Trevor, let's ask the big questions. Many of us, we had no firefighting, hose pipes, leave alone a fire extinguisher. I think we should start from there. Leave alone the structural part first. So, okay. Sem says, in regards to the school safety issue, whenever you get a business license, you also get your fire permit, and they visit you to verify compliance. Does that not happen with our schools? Okay. Ondeng says, children need to be taught basic things about fire and safety measures to take in case of a fire outbreak, both at home and at school. This clearly shows there is something wrong with our education system. Okay. It says boarding schools for primary school pupils must be done away with. I don't see the importance of boarding schools to such young children. Children of that age group still needs to be around their parents most of the time. Okay. And Mark says issues that need to be addressed include intergovernmental collaboration to ensure safety of our children. Amos, I'll come to you with closing remarks. And there's an issue there of compliance, there's an issue of boarding school. This issue of compliance, because someone had just mentioned there that you're given a license and then there's verification, they come and check. And now we know the Kenya Power and Light, Kenya Power Company are in Endarasha, trying to establish whether there were illegal connections there. Yeah. So is this an issue of just people not checking for compliance? As you make your closing remarks.
There is a serious challenge when government becomes a regulator and a player at the same time. A lot of rules in this country are really made for the private sector. They don't apply to the public sector because it is the private sector which pays for those licenses. There is literally no private school that will be operating without those licenses, and they will really be taken through a lot of serious vetting. Some of the things that government asks private schools to do, it can't even give 50% of them in the public system because it knows that it can default and you cannot take government anywhere. At least these days you can take government to court, but we still know how impunity can still reign. We have active court cases where senior government officials still don't appear in court. And who has the responsibility of ensuring compliance? It's really government that is supposed to ensure compliance. And that's why one of the things that we've tried to do, for instance, where I work, is to work with a number of players to say that compliance is on the bare minimum, how do we move away from compliance to us looking at providing leadership? And that is where now compliance is no longer an issue, because you're moving from the duty of care now to appreciate what is called the standard of care. That is not just about this is what the law requires of me, but it's about ensuring that you are improving the practice of the industry. And that is what we need. And we've had a lot of progressive minds. The late Mrs. Priscilla Were did a fantastic job throughout her work, even in the later years when she had to set up a school that operated without prefects, just to demonstrate how values could just be brought up. So there is something about, there is a lot of good work that is also happening across the country that we rarely also get to make noise about. So accidents do happen, and as I've mentioned, this country, the level of the ecosystem of safety is extremely weak. And anything can bring you down. You can eat anything. That's why even your landlord can dig a borehole and doesn't tell you that that water is safe or not. That's why you just can't take water on the taps in Nairobi. There's nothing that you can be so sure that you are safe around it. You have a public hospital that is disconnected from power. Where do you go to seek for remedy? So the ecosystem of safety in this country is a poor ecosystem. And so I agree with the Dr. when she says that maybe we need to raise the level of awareness. And that's why I did say that consumer protection, government should just be a little bit. A little bit, not too much. Tunaomba serikali tafadhali. Consumer protection. Protect Kenyans.
All right. Dr. Njoki, closing remarks.
Thank you very much. Just to echo what I had said earlier, that really we've really dropped the bar so low that the only way now we can look is up. I've been to schools where they do not have functional sanatoriums, they do not have medical staff. So when the child is sick, they look at the health science teacher, the biology teacher, who's not a qualified medical person. Some schools even use what they call a health prefect, who is a student, who is supposed to make a diagnosis of an illness in a child. If that is not below law, I don't know what that is, you know. So really, we just need to have an honest conversation as school administrators, school principals, as directors, as parents, and as government. Let's just say, you know what, we value our children. This is where we are. The only way we can go is up. And we have plenty of resources. We have plenty of excellent minds who can help. And number two, let's look at this child. This child we're taking through school, they will exit the system. What kind of a human being are we going to have after taking them through such a difficult time in school? Mentally, emotionally, psychologically, they will have the grade, but what kind of a human being will they be, you know, having to struggle so much to survive the rigors of this unpleasant environment? So let's think about the child at the end of the day. And grades are not everything. Grades are fantastic, but let us nurture the child, let us love our children, and really let us look and see how we can protect them for the sake of even the future generations. Once again, condolences for all those who are grieving, and let us hope and pray, and let us be intentional that this is the last time we are hearing about such a tragedy in this country.
Okay. Dr. Manyasa?
Thank you. First, let me discourage the chorus that is starting to be played around boarding schools. I had this from the morning, and I know it is going to get louder with many other people jumping onto the bandwagon. When there was a stampede at the Hill School in Kakamega, it was daytime, and children died.
Sunday school.
When we had a building collapse here in Dakoreti, Precious Talent, it was daytime. So when a tragedy happens at night, it becomes very easy, and people who are fond of cheap solutions to very complicated problems come up saying abolish boarding schools because there was a tragedy at a boarding school. There are reasons why we have boarding schools. There are parts of this country where children go to boarding school in grade 1 at age 6 because the nearest school is 50 kilometers away from home. There are reasons why children are in boarding schools. It is our responsibility to make sure that schools are safe for children, and that even those who commute to school, that the distance between home and school is safe for them as well. So let's not mix issues. I want to discourage that chorus. Secondly, and finally, I want to say this. The law provides for parents to play a role in the school. Whether it is public or private, parents have been edged out. In private schools, mostly parents are kept on the periphery because the private owners of the school don't want too much poking of noses into what they are doing. In public schools, government has assumed that it is the owner of those schools and the owner of children as well. And yet, government only spends 54% of the cost of education. The rest is spent by 40% parents and other actors. Yeah. The parents' schools must be opened up to public scrutiny, especially public schools, and the private schools, parents must demand more stake, because those private schools will not exist without the parents and the fees that they're paying. Okay. I want to see that when government is struggling to facilitate quality assurance officers in the field to visit schools, parents should have room to visit schools and see what is going on in those schools. All right. Thank you so much for making time this evening, Dr. Emmanuel Manyasa, Executive Director of Sawa Agenda, Dr. Njoki Fernandez, School Health and Safety Consultant, and Amos Kaburu, Chief Counsel, Opticum Group. Thank you very much for making time this evening and for having this conversation with us. We're taking a quick break. When you come back, it's time for some sporting action. Here's what's coming up.